Thanks very much, and thank you all for being here. Thanks again to Roanna and the team for inviting me to come. I can't get away with saying it's the gig of the year, because I think I used to refer to going to the ACON and the meeting as the gig of the year, because they're a little bit wild. But actually, it's been amazing seeing this network grow over, and I've had the privilege of being a participant on the sidelines. And the level of engagement at this meeting, yeah, you do put some of our colleagues over East to shame, who I think perhaps take networking for granted, given geographical proximity. And so this is all stimulating for me as someone who is based over in Sydney, but maintains a bit of work over here to hear the priorities and the interests and the questions. So some of them are the same across the country, but it's the local particularities that I think are kind of particularly interesting. So I'll be looking forward to speaking to you over the next couple of days about those. So in discussion with Roanna and others, we were kind of trying to figure out what I would speak about, and luckily Rebecca has set up my talk very nicely, giving a broader overview. We don't often coordinate as a double act, but sometimes that works. And so I'm specifically talking about research with gay men, and particularly the Perth Gay Community Periodic Survey, which is a collaborative project which has been running for 20 years, funded by the Health Department. It's good to see the funders, and I'm grateful for their ongoing support, in collaboration with Curtin in various forms and the AIDS Council as well. And I'm kind of opening this up as and people are already commenting about that, about what is going to happen now. Perhaps uptake is very live here, particularly among gay men in Perth and the Greater Metropolitan Area and elsewhere in the state. So Rebecca's already touched on this, so I don't need to go into this so much. We now know what PrEP is, and multiple studies have found high degrees of effectiveness if people take the drugs as directed. I guess thinking about the second half of this slide, the trials, the first very promising trial results were published at the end of 2010, and then pretty much immediately in 2011 we started going, well, what place does PrEP have in Australia and in different jurisdictions, and how do we get it here? And given that we hadn't been at one of the international trial sites, that was a little bit more complicated than we imagined. And there was an enormous amount of work and discussion, which often made people quite uncomfortable about how we actually could bring sort of a new evidence-based intervention to Australia and in what way. Now, I think it's really worth acknowledging that in the absence of formal access in that initial period, a lot of gay and bisexual men who were very motivated and excited by this strategy actually took matters into their own hands and imported PrEP from overseas. And I know that played a big role in WA, especially. So I think it's worth noting that, and that's quite unusual. It's legal, but it's kind of a difficult thing to do, and it requires supportive clinicians and enterprising members of the community to kind of make this thing happen. Over East, and I know you'll find us referring to ourselves in that way, over East we had small demonstration projects. It took like 3 years to get those going in Melbourne and Sydney, and then much bigger studies, and Rebecca mentioned EPIC, which is epically large, in New South Wales, which was then kind of followed by slightly smaller studies in Victoria and Queensland. And obviously you'll be aware that the WA study opened last year. Over 700 men are enrolled, as Rebecca mentioned, and then that was swiftly followed by the announcement of a public listing, which became active in April. So things have been, in the last year or two, have been changing very rapidly. It was a very slow lead-in a number of years ago. So now PrEP is here, what should we expect? So I just kind of put this at the beginning just to acknowledge international experience, but I think we are interested in talking about what might be happening here and what's happening in the rest of the country. The experience in the eastern states, but I'm also referencing work from overseas, shows that introducing PrEP at scale with gay and bisexual men has had a variety of effects. There's been a demand on health systems and services, a rapid change in scale up in the number of appointments, clinical delivery, monitoring systems, trying to work out who is going to initiate, who will have initial conversations, peer-led models, nurse-led models, when doctors need to be involved and so on. That's been extremely disruptive in locations where PrEP scale-up has been rapid, but enormous there's been an enormous amount of goodwill and a lot has been learnt. It's been really clear that PrEP is exciting gay and bisexual men at risk of HIV, and I guess there's a question there, is it exciting other groups of people at risk of HIV? And that's what you think about that. But enormous amounts of excitement around gay and bisexual men who perhaps thought that their prevention options were stagnating. We're clearly seeing very effective levels of prevention of HIV among users. I mean, the studies and trials show virtually no infections among people who take the drug as directed. We are seeing increased HIV diagnoses among users. That's consistent internationally. I mean, there's a few systematic reviews of that now, and certainly locally. But as Rebecca said, that's largely due to increased monitoring and changes in behaviour. But the thing I want to sort of focus on is the broader impact of introducing a new effective prevention option, and you could argue an alternative to condoms, into a prevention culture and a sexual culture. And we are, I think, seeing very, very rapidly changing norms and sexual behaviour among gay and bisexual men, possibly a once-in-a-generation shift. And also, as Rebecca alluded to, we're also now having a debate about who might be missed out in this scramble to develop early rollout. So I kind of want, that's kind of sitting in behind what we're presenting. I would say that PrEP rollout is a very good example of, in HIV, of an based on evidence that an intervention works, trying to work out how to actually deliver it at scale in a way that will have a beneficial effect. And I would argue that that's still an experimental process for all the talk of implementation science and all the rest of it. And I think one of the things that often gets missed is that the good and bad effects of an intervention really depend on local epidemic context. So it's great that Rebecca pointed out some of the local specifics of WA. And I want you to think about those when we talk about the behavioural data. So I'm drawing mainly on the left-hand source, the Gay Community Periodic Survey. I'm not going to describe these in great detail. It's a community-based survey, primarily gay men and a small number of bisexual men, which was very focused on the metropolitan area of Perth, but now has online recruitment as well, so it has broader scope. We're incredibly reliant on WAC for recruitment locally and before that Curtin in its previous iterations. And on the right-hand side is a national online study that I've been running, leading since 2011, on gay and bisexual men's attitudes to these new forms of prevention. I won't actually talk about that a lot, but it's informed some of my thinking. So some of the indicators. So I'm doing two things at once: get you to think about PrEP and give you some latest data on gay and bisexual men in Perth. These are indicators from the Perth Gay Community Periodic Survey. This is HIV testing, and the reason I'm putting some of these things in is to go, well, what's the background, some of the background practices of gay and bisexual men onto which PrEP is being inserted. So what this is showing you here is that the majority of metropolitan gay men in Perth and surrounding WA have been tested for HIV, over nearly 9 out of 10. That's the line in blue. It hasn't changed a lot over the years. There's a bit of a dip where we suddenly discovered all these men who've never been tested for HIV, and now we seem to have tested some of them at least, so that's good. And in orange is the men who say that they've had a test in the previous year, and that's relative. So if you compare this to a heterosexual population, these are extraordinarily high levels of testing, but as you can see, they haven't changed that much over time. Testing in the previous year has gone up. What that masks is that men who are more sexually active and take more risks, maybe they have more conjugal sex and more partners. There's been a big increase in the number of men testing 2 or 3 or 4 times a year. And that's hidden in the group there who have tested in the last 12 months. Where do they go for testing? Many of you will be aware that the offering of services in Perth has changed a lot in the last decade, particularly the emergence of M-Clinic, supported by Lewis and led by the AIDS Council. And you can see here, this is the place where men said they went for their last test. So the largest group is still general practice, so that is worth bearing in mind, that still the most common place that people go for a test is general practice. But nearly a third of men say that they got tested at a community site, and that's primarily M-Clinic in Perth, and around a quarter going to sexual health clinics or hospitals. And so I just wanted to put that in there to think, okay, where are we engaging with men if, for example, we're talking about PrEP? or other forms of prevention. What's the HIV status profile of gay men in Perth and the surrounding area? This hasn't changed a lot over the last few years. Over 8 out of 10 men believe they're HIV negative as a result of testing, and then there's 1 in 10 who say they've either never been tested or they don't know their status. And then there's a small group of men, 5%, 1 in 20, who know that they're HIV positive as a result of testing. Now that HIV prevalence hasn't changed much over the last 10 to 15 years. I guess the thing to note is that that's a lower HIV prevalence among gay men in Perth compared to, say, some of the eastern capitals, but it's still, you know, a noticeable proportion. So negotiation around HIV status still remains important. It may be slightly locally nuanced. That if you're an HIV positive man in Perth, and we've talked about this before at these meetings, you may be fairly careful about who you disclose to. Okay, so just focusing on the HIV positive men. Now I should have mentioned, when I put this up, that the Perth Gay Community Periodic Survey, the sample size ranges from about 600 to 900 per year. It's usually conducted every 2 years, so 2004, 2006. In the last 2 years, 2016, 2017, we conducted it after 1 year, and that's largely due to the vagaries of Perth Pride moving its festival dates all over the place. So we had a bit of a scramble to run the survey again in an off year, and supported by Lisa and others at the department, we were going, well, we know we're about to do PrEP rollout, so perhaps we should get a baseline survey year before it all happens. So that's kind of what the 2017 data functions as. So bear that in mind when we look at some of the other data. The other thing to note is that if positive men are only 5% of the sample, those of you with brains that work like calculators will know that the sample size of positive men is relatively small, so just bear that in mind. However, that said, this is a fairly consistent picture. This shows treatment use by positive men in orange, and of those men, the number that achieve an undetectable viral load, so viral suppression through treatment. And you can see that they're at high, treatment uptake is gradually increased over time. It's consistent in every jurisdiction we look at, and it's a really impressive increase over time from around 70% to 90% on treatment last year. And viral suppression at slightly higher levels, but perhaps reaching kind of ceiling levels there with over 90% achieving viral suppression. So the main point, as Rebecca noted, is that the majority of positive men who are playing and out and about in Perth are on treatment and they've achieved viral suppression. Now I'm going to go into some sexual behaviour indicators. There are a lot in the survey. Those of you who have been involved in the survey will know that this is a kind of a cherry picking of various things. I'm mainly talking about casual sex because historically in Perth and around the country we believe that sex with partners you don't know that well is more of a risk for transmission. You might make assumptions about each other in the heat of the moment. You may not negotiate as effectively as you might otherwise, with somebody you know a bit better. And basically, these particular indicators, particularly condomless sex with casual partners, has historically and remains the primary transmission risk factor for HIV among gay bisexual men. Now, what this shows is sex with casual partners in the last 6 months, which is what we asked about. At the bottom are men who say they avoid anal intercourse with their casual partners. That's fallen over time. So actually, gay men in Perth over time have become more likely to report anal sex with their casual partners. And then the two upper lines are consistent condom use in orange, and you can see that's bumped up and down, and now sits at 38%. And in blue, men who report any condomless sex with their casual partners. Now this could be once or twice, or it could be every time. It's more common that it's a slip up or it's occasional, but obviously that is the primary risk factors that we look at. And as you can see, since 2014, it's been gradually increasing. That's consistent with other parts of the country. And that's one of the reasons we were interested in PrEP, going, well, what do we say to men who don't always use condoms all the time? Okay, this is looking at, apologies for acronyms. CAKE is condomless anal intercourse with casual partners. If you want these slides, I'm happy for them to be circulated. I explain the acronyms at the bottom. This is condom-less sex with casual partners by HIV status. The reason I put it in, it's one of those convergence indicators, a bit like conversion rates. Traditionally, positive men have been much more likely to report condom-less sex with their partners than other men because they can't get HIV anymore. And if they negotiate around status, they might negotiate to have condom sex with another positive partner or something. They're in purple here. You can see that historically they have been more likely to report condom sex. There's a bit of a bump in 2016, which is probably due to sample size. But the main thing to note is that negative and untested men who are in green and orange, that the rates have converged. So all in Perth, it's interesting that gay men of any HIV status have now gradually become more likely to report condom sex, and they're equally likely to do so. However, when men have condom sex, they don't, and before PrEP, we've known for a long time that gay men use various strategies to try and reduce transmission risk. They don't just have condom sex and stop thinking about HIV. Some of these strategies are better than others. I'm showing you here positive men and negative men who've had condom sex with their casual partners, and four main strategies. So serosorting is matching HIV status, so it's saying I'm negative, you're negative, I'm positive, you're positive, before deciding not to use condoms. Undetectable viral load is in red, and so you can see that's the most commonly used strategy by positive men. We've been telling them that viral suppression prevents transmission, certainly fairly actively for the last few years. And they're increasingly believing in that and relying on it. Strategic positioning is positive men being in the receptive position and negative men being in the insertive position if the couple is disformed. And you can see that's been declining in popularity amongst both groups. And in purple, which is only on the negative men side, on the right-hand side, you can see the beginnings of PrEP use by enterprising negative men in Perth. The thing to note is the divergence in strategies. So positive men are much more likely to rely on their undetectable viral load, and only a minority of negative men are seeking positive partners with undetectable viral loads. Although it's gone up a little bit. Strategic positioning was much more commonly used by positive men. It's dropped. Serosorting has fallen through the floor by positive men because if you're a small population group, restricting condom-less sex to a small number of potential partners isn't that much fun, however attractive they are. And negative men, this has been something we've wrestled with for over a decade. The most common strategy that negative men who have condom-less sex historically has been matching HIV status, so serosorting. So I'm negative, you're negative. So if you're correct, of course, there's no transmission risk. The problem, of course, is it's very difficult, impossible to tell if someone's got undiagnosed HIV, and then the transmission risk is very high. And so we see this around the country. Negative men have, in the last few years, really been relying on status disclosure to negotiate condom-less sex, and that's the context in which we're introducing PrEP. And I won't talk about it here. There's been a lot been said about whether that will decline now PrEP use is gradually increasing, and whether negative men will be more open to having sex with men of different HIV status. Okay, so getting into PEP, post-exposure prophylaxis, that's been around for a very long time. It's the month-long course of antiretrovirals to prevent HIV acquisition after a potential exposure. I've heard many stories visiting Perth over the years about how easy or difficult it is to access PEP. And I know that Sue Lang, one of Lisa's former colleagues, who's now left us, and she acknowledged all the work that Sue's done over the years in this field. She was obsessed with getting PEP awareness up in Perth. She was like, come on, why don't people know about PEP? And you can see that's PEP awareness is here in blue among the gay men in the survey. And it's at very low levels a long time ago. It has gradually increased. And the funniest thing, now we've started talking to people about PrEP awareness has shot up through the roof because we often have to explain to them what the difference is. The extraordinary thing here is the line in red is PrEP awareness. So once we actually started talking about PrEP to gay and bisexual men, there was a lot of interest, and awareness levels have rocketed up in the last 4 or 5 years. Now down at the bottom, on the right-hand side of graph, you can see levels of use, and they're actually pretty low. Now, levels of PEP use are hiding there in green at around 1%. So PEP uptake is still very low, and it tends to be very low around the country, but it is pretty low in Perth. So there's still seem to be some issues here for men who don't have other forms of protection coming forward and requesting PEP if it's justified. What you can see there is that little perk up in PrEP use. Now, if you think about it, PrEP use back in 2014 was probably almost exclusively personal implementation. And in the last year, it probably is still, in this survey, it's still personal implementation because this was just before the trial announced. Now, this is national data. It's just showing that, it's just showing that interest in using PrEP, that's in orange, is gradually increasing, and concerns about using it are falling. I won't say more about that in order to try and stick to time. But basically, community attitudes, as people find out about it, are becoming more positive. Okay, so some of the meat. This is a different way of looking at sex between casual partners, affectionately referred to as the rainbow slide, because it's the easiest way to refer to it. It's the same data that I showed earlier, but divided by sort of PrEP use and undetectable viral load. At the bottom are the kind of low-risk strategies, so no anal intercourse, condom use is in green, and then all the strategies above are those 44% or more of men who say they have condomless sex. And in light blue are positive men with undetectable viral load. In yellow is that initial sliver of men saying they're using PrEP. And above, the majority of men who have condomless sex with casual partners are not on PrEP in Perth. And that's the same in the rest of the country. The question we have is like whether that group will decline in size as we target PrEP and roll it out, or whether that will continue as condom use becomes less normative. And then the question is, as Rebecca alluded to it, what will we do if condom use continues to fall? Like, will PrEP use make enough of a difference at a population level? But the problem children are the men in red, and in the bright red are men who have receptive sex, which is the highest potential risk for HIV transmission. Because of course they could, if they have undiagnosed HIV, they can give HIV to each other, even if this other group of men are protected from HIV. What does it look like around the rest of the country? Well, so this is all the other states and territories. It includes Perth up to last year. 2018 is only Melbourne, but it's one of the biggest surveys. That's what we did at the beginning of the year. And what you can see is this dramatic increase in PrEP use. That's in yellow. Up to over 1 in 6 gay men with casual partners saying they're on PrEP and they're having condom sex. But the thing that's been interesting is that the red segment, the men who are unprotected by PrEP having condom sex, who are the targets of PrEP in the guidelines, has not really declined much. And which group has declined? It's men having consistent condom use. So overall, we have a much bigger group of men who say they don't use condoms with their casual partners, at least some of the time. The proportion of them which are protected by PrEP, so if you look at the light blue upwards on this, and ignore the rest, you can see that about nearly 50% are now protected by antiretroviral based prevention, PrEP or HIV treatment, but around 40 to 50% are still unprotected by PrEP or treatment prevention. So the question, and as Rebecca said, is this a sufficient level of coverage to achieve declines in all transmission continue to occur? So in summary, PrEP is being introduced again by bisexual men against a backdrop of high levels of testing, so that means service engagement, moderate HIV prevalence of 5%, but high levels of treatment uptake and viral suppression. Condomless sex between casual partners has been gradually increasing. In the context of positive men increasingly relying on treatment prevention, but negative men largely relying on status disclosure and preferentially seeking out negative partners for condomless sex. There's very rapidly increasing awareness and willingness to use PrEP. The data from October last year show, at that time, relatively modest level of uptake of PrEP, and very little impact on condom use at that particular point. But that was before the trial started in Melbourne and the PBS listing. The national data, the broader picture, where PrEP rollout had been more advanced, indicates that PrEP is likely to disrupt colonies as a normative strategy. So some questions and considerations. It's an open question whether this decline in colonies will impede the population impact of PrEP. Modelling aside, we just don't know at this point. There are promising signs from New South Wales. Other jurisdictions like Victoria, we don't really know what difference rapid PrEP uptake has made. If sustaining colony use is important, this is a question to you, it remains unclear how to maintain it in the presence of rolling out an attractive alternative for some men. One thing we do know is that lower levels of colony use and high levels of testing, particularly for PrEP users, means more STI diagnosis and treatment. So that's good and bad. Survey and qualitative data suggest that the rapid changes in experiences of gay and bisexual men negotiating sex due to PrEP had some really positive impacts like reduction of anxiety, and I know others are talking about the local experience later, but also some challenges, particularly around negotiation. I'd be interested to hear what you think about that. And I think that encouraging effective norms about negotiation and supporting each other while strategies are unfamiliar are likely to be critical to long-term success. And we'd just like to acknowledge the many, many people, particularly the local partners, for making this research possible. Thank you.